Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us after that fantastic, absolutely beautiful, stunning film High Ground. Congratulations to everyone here involved, Stephen and Trav. It's a really, really special film. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which you meet and which I'm on, the people of the Kulin Nations, and wherever around, and the families and the communities of the traditional owners that you are here today to learn and share in our stories. And I'd like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, and of course welcome and acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today, or tonight I should say, it's a late one. And for those of you who are in Victoria with me, it's our first night, and I'd send my love to all of you, as I'm sure everyone in Australia is doing. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful guests here today. We have Stephen Johnson, who is the director, producer and cinematographer of High Ground. So we're very lucky to have Stephen with us. He started his career at Channel 9 as just a trainee, as a cameraman, and look at him now. He's worked on mainstream drama, news, current affairs shows, and has established his own production house and operated narrow cast television station in Darwin, where he directed, produced and photographed drama, documentaries, televisions and commercials, animations. I think the list goes on and on, Stephen. We could be here all night.
Yeah, that'll do.
But he's also completed this second feature film in High Ground, which is 20 years in the making. So we're looking forward to talking about it. So welcome to you, Stephen. We also have Yvonne with us today, who's a candidate for the Lord Mayor of Sydney. She's the first Indigenous Australian candidate for the Lord Mayor of Sydney, which will be on the 4th of September in 2021. She's also an elected chair of the Metro Local Advisory Land Council, deputy chair of the New South Wales Australia Day Council, a board member of Domestic Violence New South Wales, and a board member of Redfern Jar Jum College. And the list goes on of the amazing, wonderful things that Yvonne also does for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And Travis Akbar, writer and producer, welcome. He's a Wongatha man who grew up on the west coast of South Australia. I'm a proud Yankajara Wirrunga woman from the west coast of South Australia too, so it's nice to have you here, Trav. He's a screenwriter and freelance writer. He's got current projects in development across Australia, Mexico, Canada, and the US. So all of these amazing achievements. So congratulations to the three of you all, and welcome to tonight's Fan Force TV Indigenous Movie Festival to talk about High Ground. So let's start with you, Stephen. This is a period piece set in 1919 and highlights Australia's very difficult relationship with, well, that colonial history. And how do you think the relationship with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people has changed since then? It's a big question.
Well, I suppose one could say that people aren't galloping around on horses and shooting people anymore. However, I think, the dispossession, the abuse, the ignorance, and the very simple fact that we fail to recognise what a precious and important culture, the oldest living culture on earth we have in this country, is still just not being embraced and recognised and respected in the ways that it should be. For me, that's a great tragedy. I've been very, very fortunate to have grown up in Arnhem land, and my very, very best friends are Yolngu and Binning people. And I've seen and heard so many wonderful things in my life, and feel so connected to this country and to Earth through that experience. I think it's such a great shame and missed opportunity that we're still disconnected in that way.
Yes, there were definitely things that were said within your film that like immediately made my body go, oh, because it was words that I've heard here in 2021 or in the last few years. And I thought, wow, like it sort of struck me. So yeah, that's so true that there's such a missed opportunity with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture being embraced. Now, Stephen, what was the process like filming on Arnhem land? And as a non-Indigenous filmmaker, how do you navigate cultural sensitivities when creating, when creating this kind of work?
Absolutely. Well, look, as I say, for me, it's a kind of life experience growing up and living in that part of the world. So my very, very best friends are Yolngu people. We're at school together. We've hunted and fished and grown up together. I spent a massive part of my life working very closely with Yothu Yindi, and really making High Ground was a collaboration of myself and the families that I've been adopted into and families right across Arnhem Land. So it's very, very much a both ways, bridging between two cultures and coming together and telling a very important story that really belongs to all of us.
So for you, what I'm hearing is that it's a part of listening to each other and embracing each other's thoughts and cultures and beliefs and respecting them.
Yeah, definitely, Shelley. I mean, you know, it was 20 years in the making, High Ground, and that involved a lot of listening, a lot of learning, a lot of, you know, incredible sort of journeys through country, looking at different locations. Country was very, very much a part of that exploration as well, just sitting quietly in some very, very special places, and, you know, being introduced to the ancestors, and really just taking the time to think and realize and grapple with what is now the story of High Ground, but just to try and find the balance, to try and find an entertaining way to tell that story in a way that would immerse people in it and not preach to people, but entertain people and allow people to go away and just think about things in their own way and reflect upon life, I suppose.
Yeah, for me, like when you're talking about reflecting, when I watched it, I immediately left thinking that there is sometimes so much distrust between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. Then that moment where right at the end where there's the death and that he's like so conflicted, and so like I didn't know, I thought I couldn't trust you, but I turned out that I could. Like that really stayed with me for a while. I watched it last night for the first time, so that's actually been a moment I've been thinking about all day, and I would say the people that have watched will be a moment that stays with them as well. So Yvonne, you're going into politics, and we're talking about what Stephen's talking about here, about this gap that still exists. You know, what, I mean, I hate to sound like a political investigator or a political, what are we called, media presenters, but what are some of the things that you intend to implement to try and, you know, close that gap between our people?
I think I certainly, you know, feel that all of us, you know, and firstly I need to acknowledge as a Wiradjuri woman that I need to acknowledge that I'm on Gadigal land, pay my respects to all elders past and present. I specifically need to reflect upon the people of the Eora Nation who experienced the first impact on behalf of all Aboriginal nations across this continent. For me, my journey has been certainly built on activism, or certainly free movements in ways for generations before me, and I certainly hope, you know, post me that it will continue as well. The gap, what Stephen has captured and certainly has spoken about, is so important to be looked at. People actually don't like to have those conversations, and you know, having those conversations is an essential part, an important part of what we need to do. Because if we don't, we actually don't change anything. It's always pretty cool when you see this live stuff happening, isn't it? But as far as now, my 20, almost 30 years, actually it probably is 30 years, experience in working in various fields, and you know, I particularly work, you know, at the moment I'm working in youth justice, and when I see that 10-year-olds can be, you know, put in detention and no one sees that it's a problem in this country, it's a worry. And when you see some of the issues that are captured in the film, you know, whether it's politics or whether it's actually doing what we do on an everyday basis in various walks of life, is about how do we make change, but how, more importantly, do we walk together? And so I'm not I don't, you know, politician sort of term is not really what I sit well with, or even a leadership term. But for me, it's just a matter of what can I contribute, because I've had so much more around me that that I've been able to go forward because of my elders that have set the pathway for me. But what do we all do for so many others that will come behind us?
Absolutely. Pave a better way for them, for their better future. Now, Travis, someone who works in both NGOs and in film, how can the power of arts inspire people to understand First Nations history and cultural heritage?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll just like to acknowledge that I'm on Paramount country first, up in the Adelaide Hills here. Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's very difficult to answer, really, because I think personally, to flip back to question one, and what everything that Stephen said, like I think more the environment has changed, but people really haven't changed a lot. So the relationships are still, you know, like frayed, but the environment's just completely different, and how things happen is different. So a lot of it seems like it's okay, but it's not. But now because those things haven't really changed, those relationships, we're seeing like a bit of a self-serving machine in terms of like racism and unconscious bias, and it just continues because of the size of European population. For one, like that's just something we can't change, really. So that's where art comes into it, and we can see different cultures, we can see different coloured people, we can see different looking faces, and all these different things will challenge the current narrative. And that's where I really think it can inspire everyone and anyone that watches it, because the more you see of people that aren't like you, the more you can empathise with them, and the more stories you hear, the more you can understand them. So, you know, the more films we make, and the more filmmakers that aren't Indigenous like Stephen that do take the time and to learn how to do it properly, that's when this art and film will definitely start inspiring more and more people.
Challenging what we're comfortable with, Trav. Myra Geddes has said a compliment first and has a question for you, Stephen. What a powerful film. Thank you. I'd love to hear more about the movie when it was talking about the tension between holding on to anger and caring for country, listening to the wind. So when you were talking about that in the film, what can you tell us more about that, Stephen?
Okay, well, look, in a sense, the idea of that really came from the old people and the families as we were researching and thinking about this story. And it goes way back to moments when people first started arriving here. Pemulwuy was defending this country, and there were different kind of trains of thought there. The old women were thinking there should be a conversation and an attempt at sort of finding peace and a balance, because they reckon these fellows going to keep coming. There were warriors who wanted to fight. There was, you know, not everyone agreed with the processes and the ways of dealing with the situation. So we try and look at that kind of conflict and the realities and the misunderstandings of both sides. I mean, mistakes were made by everybody back in the day. I mean, people couldn't even understand each other. You know, different languages were being spoken. It was a complete disconnection in so many ways. The white fellas who came up north in those years, they themselves were dispossessed. I mean, they'd come back from a horrific war and were running away from themselves, from life. So, I mean, it was a very, very confusing time for everyone. And I think, as I said earlier, you know, it's about everybody grappling with the situation and trying to sort of find their place within it. So those kind of things were spoken in that way in the film, to try and sort of convey that confusion and that imbalance and all of those thought processes that were taking place back in the day. Hopefully that makes sense.
Makes sense. I'm just muting myself because my puppy makes perfect sense. And caring for country, caring for country, Trav, explain to Myra what we're talking about with caring to country and listening to the wind, or, you know, listening to country, if you don't mind.
Yeah, land's you know, we belong to the country. You know, we belong to the land. Mother Earth is you know, law, and we just need to listen to like I said, listen to the wind, listen to everything, and just we see what needs to be done, and we hear what needs to be done, and we feel it. You know, I think any black fella will tell you, like, there's no better feeling than getting your socks off and putting your feet in the dirt and just feeling it, you know, feeling yourself being at one with country. Yeah, it's just a very, very, how do I put it? It's an intimate thing, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, super important.
And it's our cultural responsibility, like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, Yvonne. We have totems, and a part of our and our creator spirits. So part of our cultural responsibility is to care for the country that they need, or whatever the resources they need in the country in which they live in, to make sure that we can keep them alive, and also to have that cultural responsibility to look after country for future generations as well, don't we, Yvonne?
Yeah, we certainly do. I mean, you know, like I call, you know, Sydney surviving, it's not living. And when I go home to country, I go home to my spirit, and I don't, you know, I listen to my people that have come before me, that although I can't physically see them, but I feel them. And, you know, like my rivers behind me, it's you know, it became known as the Lachlan after some fella that come here, but, you know, to my people, it's the Clare or the Glary. And so for me, you know, caring for country in various ways, and what we, you know, the cycle of what we contribute has to be owned. And when we talk about those gaps and we talk about what we're responsible for, we are responsible for each other, but we are responsible for Mother Earth as well. And if we can't look after what we do have, then that won't look after us neither. So, you know, there's so much that we have to be able to do together. And, you know, even when I'm looking at, you know, in my Lord Mayorship campaign, is that, you know, actually making Sydney livable again. I think in certain ways, you know, as we emerge from this pandemic, there's so much more that we need to be able to do, and we have to be able to do it with everyone coming together and creating a unified approach, but certainly looking at it that we ensure that what we have in terms of the environment and what we continue to, rather than say that we're going to do something, actually do it, and put that into action in a way that is not going to be detrimental for future generations. And, you know, whether it's in Sydney or whether it's home in Cowra or, you know, in the Riverina areas where my family are from, you know, it's about, we have to give honour. You cannot honour yourself if you don't honour what you're doing and what you're owning. And for me, that's an important part of what I will always do for my people that are no longer here, because they didn't get those opportunities. They were part of, you know, some of the atrocities that took place in this country, and I owe it to them, and I owe it to my, you know, my descendants in time, so that they can actually know that I did it for them as well.
Absolutely. And I'll ask you this question to Yvonne. Well, it's a compliment to you, Steve. An impressive movie. Thank you. From, I hope I get this right, Amelie Meyer. And she's asked, her 8-year-old daughter is asking why our history has to be so sad, Yvonne. And she's asking if there are any other Indigenous movies for you, for children. I'll go back to you, Stephen, for that. But first of all, Yvonne, let's break it down for this 8-year-old daughter, because you're probably best suited with, you're not probably, I very much know Stephen and Trav know about the past policies that have affected Aboriginal people, but let's break it down, and considering your position that you're in now, of why our history is so sad and why this Amelie's daughter is feeling this way.
I think that part of history, you know, there isn't a conscious decision about how that gets made, because we live it. And I think, you know, certainly what's been captured in this film, but what we see in our past, and not too long ago neither, you know, I mean, some of it we still live. We live it. It's sad because there isn't the same care. And I struggle with it myself, like to try and tell my children that you need to expect this sort of treatment, because that's treatment that you're going to get. And until people actually, I think Aboriginal people are the most inclusive people in the world. We have over 200 nations across this continent, and we've got over 200 different nationalities from across the globe, and we're still inclusive enough to be able to do welcomes and acknowledgements and including people. Unfortunately, the part of our people's history is that we haven't been treated with the same way. But I think there are moments, and being a part of standing as Sydney's first Aboriginal Lord Mayor candidate, but and I think it's actually, I don't know if it's happened anywhere else, but when I think about that difference, and I didn't really think about it because I was part of a team and then I became the team, but for me the reflection upon that is that we're not a figment of people's imaginations. We're real life people, and we're not this story over there, because we're actually a part of everyone else's story. And sometimes the sadness is because people actually didn't ever think about that. And I think that now for this 8-year-old that's learning this, that she will become a mum one day maybe, and she will then maybe say, well, I actually made this change as an 8-year-old to make sure that when I was an adult that I didn't treat the First Nations people of this continent the same way that other people have.
Thank you. And I guess also to say to your daughter as well is that we're reflecting on the history of the last 250 years, but Aboriginal and Aboriginal people have been here for 65,000 plus years, and Torres Strait Islander people for 2,500. A lot of beauty in our culture, a lot of positive stories to share with you. So there's also a lot of good and beauty within our history, and sometimes we have to look at some of the bad things that have happened so that we can move together, and that's what this week is about reconciliation and learning these stories so that we don't make those same mistakes that we've made in the past 250 years. So we have to sometimes look at the hard parts of our history to move forward. So any movie recommendations, Travis, Stephen, for our young 8-year-old movie buff?
Well, I'd like to say watch Yulma Boy, but there's a few things in that film that are a little bit beyond an 8-year-old. But I mean, hey, Walkabout, Storm Boy, it's not that they're Indigenous films and stuff, but they're beautiful stories. They were great films that I always remember. Travis, I don't know, young.
Yeah. In terms of feature film, there's not much. And this is something I've seen actually discussed quite often.
In My Blood It Runs, a gorgeous.
Yes.
There's Emu Runner and Zach's Ceremony. Probably a little bit old, do you think, maybe for our 8-year-old friend, Zach's Ceremony? Maybe.
Yeah.
I think if you explore ABC iView and SBS, there's a lot of like little series and stuff that are really good for kids.
Yeah.
Like Robbie Hood might fit the bill. That was really good. Maybe a little bit too young to watch that, possibly.
Some beautiful picture storybooks. So many beautiful storybooks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Check out David Gorpala in Storm Boy. Amazing.
Yeah, that's what classic stays with you forever. You'll love that one. Now, Phyllis Jane Rose wants to know, is the soundtrack available?
Okay, good question. Look, as you know, there is no musical score as such. It's all song cycles, song lines, and natural soundscape. But we've had so many requests about the soundtrack for the film. I'm actually thinking that we're going to do a mix, yes. So the answer is I'm hoping we will release that and perhaps expand upon it. But the whole idea of the soundscape, and it was beautiful hearing you speak, Yvonne, about country and belonging, and the fact that human beings are not disconnected to Earth. We are all stardust, and we're all one thing. And that's a very, very beautiful way to think. And I remember growing up thinking that from a very young age, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts I was ever given. But yeah, the soundscape was all about drawing you into the film and into country, because the country is very much a character in the story. And yes, I hope it will be available.
Beautiful. And this film has been released. Pamela's saying, has it the film been widely released? But I do believe it was in cinemas, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It had a very, very wide release in cinemas from the 28th of January. It's done really, really well. It was released in the US last week, and apparently it's going really well. But unfortunately, with COVID, as we all know, things haven't quite gone to plan with its international release, and it's all still very slowly taking place.
Cool. Now, Angie's saying for you, Stephen, is this perspective was so powerful as the grandfather looked up and stopped to listen. She found that quite compelling, that moment in the film. So that was beautiful. There were so many moments like that where that listening is just so important, and it's a real part of Aboriginal people.
It is, and I'll tell you a little lovely story about that. It's really nice to hear that people are responding to those things in the film and the story, because it was very, very important for the old people that we got every sound, every bug, every bird, and every breath of wind was placed in the soundtrack correctly, so that with each site we went to, with each location where we filmed, there are creatures and animals that live in that place and make all of the sounds, and nothing was allowed to be there that wasn't there. So a lot of care was put into placing every sound. And I remember there was a frog croaking in one scene, and it had somehow snuck in there out of some other scene. And Alfred said to me one day, "What's that? What's that?" And we're all going, "What? That sound there, that sound, that frog, he doesn't live there, put him out." And,
wow.
Yeah, so it was really beautiful. So it's lovely to hear people responding to those kind of gentle elements of the film, because they are actually subliminally very powerful, and they're all telling a story.
Yeah, well, that story was very much conveyed, so congratulations. Carmen Ho says, "I really enjoyed the film. Thank you. It was definitely thought-provoking. It was also great to see women had a voice and a degree of influence in the story rather than linger in the background." Was that also a conscious choice, Stephen?
Yes, it was. Look, I mean, obviously, the story is driven by very strong male characters, protagonists in the film, but it was always about trying to create a balance, and I believe that we've achieved that, and that's, you know, a huge thanks to Esmeralda Maramoa, who plays the part of Gulwari. I mean, she was one of the traditional owners from Cannon Hill. Her grandfather had given permission for us to make the film on his country before he passed away. And there's a beautiful scene where both her and Jacob are in the cave around the fire. And in real life, they're actually poisoned. They're not supposed to speak or communicate. But the elders gave permission for them both to be in the film and to be in those scenes, because they were two young people who were landowners where we made the film, and they wanted to stand up and tell their stories. So permission was given for them to both be in the film, and Esmeralda delivers. I mean, she's got the power of every woman behind her in Arnhem Land. They're all singing for her, and she wanted to do more than anything in the world, and it's her story. She was amazing.
So, Stephen, there will be people that will be now sitting there going, "What do you mean they're not allowed to speak?" So, because you've spent so much time in Arnhem Land, could you quickly explain to them about the skin?
Yeah, well, look, very basically, it's a kinship law where opposites Yirritjadua, certain family members and people aren't really permitted to talk with each other or communicate with each other. It's out of respect and keeping lineage pure in that way. It can get quite complicated, but essentially it's commonly referred to as poison cousins. And yeah, it's a way of sort of keeping pure blood. Yeah, preserving.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, we've had some, and I'm hoping I'm getting your name right. Emily says, "Thank you, everyone, very kindly for answering that question." And Yvonne said, "That film terrified me, yet I felt hope at the end. Such complex characters, which raised so many questions about humankind." And she also agreed the soundtrack is superb. So it's great that there's a lot of thought-provoking and it's challenging people in the way that they're thinking, and also understanding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, or Aboriginal in this particular film. So for all of you, we'll start with you, Yvonne. Tell us about any projects you've got coming up. I think we might know your project. And how can the community follow your work?
Oh, yeah, I mean, certainly it's been a massive, it's not quite 2 weeks since it was announced that I was going to throw my hat into the ring. So I have a website, yvonneweldon.com.au. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. Be great for people to share and provide any information that they think I should know. But certainly views are welcomed. I love to engage with people. My projects is not just about this campaign. There's so much more that I have done in my life and have been guided by so many wonderful people I will continue to do that in all that I do. And certainly if I can get in to be the first Aboriginal person to be elected on council, it'd be fabulous to be the Lord Mayor. But if I can get there, like, I really want to ensure that certainly some of the issues that get captured in these questions is around how do we include First Nations, but how do we actually include all nations to make sure that we are walking together. You know, it isn't about them over there and us over here. It's actually about how do we go forward together, because if you don't include all, you're actually not. And you know, we're not making the change. We're not going to change what's it's important to reflect what's taken place in the past, but we won't change the future unless we actually start to be conscious of what we are contributing. And for me, it's always being about inclusive, and it certainly is about not leaving anyone behind.
Absolutely, beautifully said. Trav, what about you? Up and coming projects, and how do we up and coming projects, and how does the community follow you?
I'm on Twitter. I don't really use it that much. But, I mean, I did for a while, but now I've just been.
Has that effect, love?
So, yeah. But no, projects. Yeah, I'm working on a TV series with a studio in the US, which I created. So I'm hoping, you know, in the next few months there could possibly be some announcements. We'll see. But it's a very slow industry, so also we might not see.
Well, fingers and toes crossed for you. How do we find out if they will be happening? Do you have a website, or just on Twitter?
Yeah, probably just Twitter. And if you're interested in film, sign up to like all the Screen Australia and state agency like newsletters. That's a really good way to find out about new projects. They're really supportive. So yeah.
Fantastic. And what about you, Stephen? Are you sleeping for the next 20 years, or have you got something else going on?
Look, unfortunately, can't really talk about too much about the other things I'm doing. But look, definitely, there's another very big historical drama that I'm working on, and I will say that it sort of involves, it's set around the time of the Queensland Native Police and the many things that took place in this country around that time. And the other one is nothing at all to do with any of that. It's set in around a gay nightclub. There you go.
There you go. Look forward to that.
Yes.
Mixing it up. It'd be nice and interesting work that you do. You're a lucky man doing what you love.
I do.
We have one last question. Kim is saying that she has started on a journey of listening and understanding of Indigenous culture. For those who want to learn and connect with Indigenous peoples to help bridge the gap, where do you suggest that they start? Who'd like to answer this question? Stephen.
I would suggest that you get yourself to the Garma Festival up in Arnhem. That takes place this year between the 30th of August and the 2nd of June. It's a beautiful opportunity to go up to northeast Arnhem Land and interact with the Yolngu families up there, and to see Bungal, and to interact with all sorts of cultural activities, and to meet and speak with Yolngu people from all around that region. That's one idea that I would suggest.
It's a fantastic idea, one I'd love to do, and I'm jealous that you have been there, Stephen.
Yeah, well, come on, Shelley. Hey, come on. It's time for you to get up there. You'd love it.
It is. I've taken a gig where I'm actually going to be on radio, on ABC radio, while someone else is up there, and we're going to talk. But next year is my aim with the game. So let's see.
Tragic screening I Am Gorpalil, High Ground, and a series of wonderful Indigenous films from all around the world this year up at Garama too. So, and there's, you know, lots of amazing activities taking place.
It'll be wonderful. The other thing that you can do is that there's a lot of self-education. The internet is full of amazing things that is fantastic. You can definitely head off to festivals when we're allowed to, or if you're allowed to in your state. Be a part of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, read books. There's so many books. Anita Heiss, she's an amazing author, is constantly posting like stacks of books of other people's work, you know, that you can be inspired by and make a connection and, you know, involving yourself in that way. Can you think of anything else quickly, Trav and Yvonne, that people can do to engage and... Yep. Yeah,
just start local, you know, you know, find out whose country on, find out who your elders are, and see if you can have a yarn with them and just learn. And if you can't find them, learn the history of that nation through the internet, like I said, and through that you'll probably come across someone that you can learn from and speak to, and
and start local. They can head to their local land council or.
Certainly, I mean, certainly land councils. I mean, you know, all states and territories are different, but you know, the common aspect of, I mean, a lot of people actually, you know, want to understand how to engage with Aboriginal people, and if you just come with respect, you'll get respect in return. And you know, there's so much that I want to learn about so many other people as well, and you know, and that sharing of that, you know, of culture and just of different walks of life is such an important part of who we are. I mean, we'll never understand even the amount of different nations of Aboriginal people across this continent. And so, you know, if you go local, I think, you know, there's always opportunities. We've always been here and we always will be.
Yeah, beautiful. Perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Stephen, Trav and Yvonne. It has been wonderful. Good with your future endeavours, and thank you so much for this beautiful film, High Ground, and sharing it with us.
It's a pleasure. Vote Sydney, vote 1 for Yvonne.
Thank you.